Serious, what's the paranormal story you have? I remember a few years ago, my friends and I were going to this downtown Halloween pub crawl thing and we were getting our Halloween costumes on. As I stepped out of the bathroom, I heard this gruff old man's voice go, "Who are you?" Exclamation mark. Question mark. Apostrophe. So I spin around. The bedroom near the bathroom was empty. Lights off, and I ask my friend if she heard anyone. She just goes, "Oh yeah, that's my grandpa Perez," like it's a common occurrence for her. I farm in a rural town in the western US, and our farm is a ways out of town, so naturally it's pretty airy at night. We flood irrigate, so the water needs to be moved from field to field, and those water changes just come whenever the fields are finished. At each end of our farm there is a big row of trees that once again get kind of eerie at night. So my dad and I were driving down our farm road at around 3 AM. We reached the row of trees, and as the headlights hit the trees I saw a strange figure. It looked to be the rough shape of a human, but not quite the same. Taller and more hunched over, kind of like a 63-year-old woman in a shawl. I only saw it for 2 maybe 3 seconds, but it was long enough to make my blood run cold. I was so freaked out, so I didn't say anything to my dad. About 30 seconds later my dad started driving faster and looked over at me and said, "I wasn't going to say anything, but did you happen to see a strange figure walk between the trees?" I nodded and we changed the water and went home. There has been a local legend about a creature that looks like what we saw that has been talked about since the 40s. It's supposed to be similar to a Native American skinwalker, and it would make sense to me. We have found Indian pottery and arrowheads all over our farm. Neither of us have seen it again, but it is still in the back of my mind when I drive to that corner of the farm. I've posted this before. When I was a new mom, shortly after my grandmother had died, we visited her family cottage several states away. It was a small 2-story cottage, with the bedrooms being situated on the 2nd floor. My son was only about 4 to 6 weeks old, so I was worried that he would keep my other family members awake at night with needing to be fed, being new to the world, etc. Well, the inevitable happened, and my son would not stop fussing in the middle of the night. I decided to go outside with my little guy to get a bit of fresh air. The cottage had burned down to the chimney a couple of years earlier, and the house had been rebuilt, so I wasn't familiar with its new tits and bits. I went outside and apparently the door was unlocked from the inside, but the outside lock was engaged. Now here I am, in the middle of pretty much nowhere, locked out of the house at 3 AM with a newborn. I tried the door again and again, and could not get it to open. I even threw pebbles, and then rocks at my husband's window. To no avail. As I sat outside the door, my back leaning against it, about to lose it completely, I heard a click. The door was unlocked. The door that I had tried dozens and dozens of times to open simply unlocked. Everyone was still soundly asleep and didn't recall hearing any noises at all in the morning. The door had a window, and I could see the entirety of the bottom floor through it. No one was there, but it unlocked for me. One story in particular comes to mind for me. I have 2 brothers, one older by 2 years, and one younger by 9 years. My younger brother was supposed to be a twin. Sadly my mom lost her. My little brother as a baby and toddler was always staring at the ceiling laughing, and we always used to say he must be playing with his sister. It stopped after that, but as he got older we noticed he did a lot of talking to himself. We figured it was an imaginary friend. So one night, it was just my dad, my little brother, about 5 at the time, and I still awake. It was pretty late for him to be up, like 9 PM, and he was still running around full of energy. I basically said to my dad he's on his own getting him to sleep because I'm going to bed. So as I got to the top of the steps I felt frozen. Really the best way to explain it, and I listened to my dad trying to get my little brother downstairs. My dad is like, "Come on, insert name here, you have to go to bed, it's late." He kept saying, "No dad, I'm playing." Exclamation mark. So my dad gave up and said, "Okay, fine, but you're going to be up here by yourself, I'm going to bed." And my little brother says loud and clear, "No dad, I'm not alone. Never. I'm playing with my sister," to which my dad answered that I was in bed. He said, "No dad, my other sister. She's not ready to go to bed yet." When I was struggling with heroin addiction, my mom, who is fairly religious, Suggested I go to church and maybe talk to someone there about what was going on. I was pretty close to rock bottom at the time, so I thought, what the hell, I'll go talk to someone. Walk to the Catholic church down the street. I'm not Catholic, but it was the closest church, and walked in. This young preacher, he was wearing all black with a collar, looked about late 20s early 30s with brown hair and brown eyes, green eyes, walked out into the hall the same time I walked in and introduced himself as Father Mike. He looked at me and said, "You look like something is pulling you down. Do you need to talk?" I said yeah, and we sat in the entry hallway and talked. We talked for about 2 hours. Everything just poured out of me. I felt so comfortable with him and at peace. Talked about the addiction issues and how my life was so messed up at that point that I was thinking about killing myself to just stop the cycle. He looked me in the eye with these crazy green eyes. I've never seen anybody with that shade of green before, and told me, "You don't have much time left. You keep using, and you're on borrowed time, and there's not much of that left. Get yourself into detox and get your shit together. Otherwise you won't have to worry about taking your life." I said yeah, I know. I've done this a bunch of times. He cut me off and said, "I know. I'm being serious, Anakin. If you don't get sober this time, you won't get another chance." When he said that, I got chills. So I thanked him for his time, called my mom, and she drove me to detox. On the way to the hospital I told my mom about Father Mike, and she said she was going to thank him for talking with me. Fast forward about 2 weeks and mom calls me in treatment. She says that she went to the church and asked for Father Mike. The staff said that there wasn't anyone named Mike who worked there, and there wasn't any young man with brown hair and green eyes. She asked if I was sure about Father Mike. I said I was 100%. I still remember how green his eyes were. She checked at various other churches in the area, thinking I was high, and wandered farther from the place I was staying. No one had a Father Mike or anyone who fit his description. Mom is completely convinced that I had a run-in with my guardian angel. I wasn't so sure, but his eyes and the way he said "you won't get another chance" instead of "you might not get another chance" still gives me chills. I did go on to get sober and get my life together. Had a dream I was hanging out with my best friend from 4th grade. Hadn't seen or spoken to him years. He left randomly with someone I didn't know in a car I didn't recognize, and I woke up shortly after. Come to find out he died in a car accident the night before around 2 or 3 am with his friend in the passenger seat. Few hours after I went to bed. Still wild to me. Can't really explain it away as coincidence entirely, I don't think. But who knows. The student center in my university used to have a restaurant slash cafeteria slash food court in its basement with 2 sets of stairs going back to the first floor. Stories said that it was haunted, but I always thought it was a joke. I liked to study down there in the evening because the food court was closed and the booths were empty, and that gave me a lot of space to spread out my books and notes and some peace and quiet. The layout was that one set of stairs was next to the booth, so sitting where I was I could see if anyone came or went. The other set of stairs were behind me down a hallway that had some storage closets and the restrooms. There was nothing else down that hall. So I was studying one day in the empty food court and I had to go pee. So I go down the hallway into the bathroom. Motion sensing lights turn on. I do my business and start washing my hands when I hear a soft cough inside the restroom, as if someone was trying to get my attention. I finish washing my hands and I turn and realize the stalls are all open. I'm alone in this goddamn restroom. I briskly went to my booth and started packing my bags. And before I went up the stairs I looked around, and sure enough, there was nobody there. I start making my way up the stairs when I heard the same cough right behind me. I've seen the movies. I did not turn around. I also never sat down there again, even after they remodeled it. My house was bought by my grandparents when it was being built in the 50s. One of the builders fell off the rafters and died where the kitchen would be. They never knew his name, but he is the only one to die at the house. He hangs around. We call him Bob. He usually just slides stuff off the kitchen counter onto the floor. He also likes to open cabinet doors. One in particular is the one next to the hallway. It opens and you skin your shin when you walk into it. Did that the other day and got pissed. Bought a new latch for the door and now it is hard to open. The night after I did that I was in the living room and that cabinet door started making a racket. The cats were with me, so I figured it was Bob and said aloud, "Knock it off, Bob." It stopped immediately. I said thank you, and that was the end of it. He has been with us for over 60 years. He's a pretty cool guy. On a side note, I think I know why he fell and died. Every time I dig a hole in the yard I find nothing but pull tabs and broken beer bottles. Those guys must have been plastered the whole time they built my house. Since I was a little kid my nightmares have contained this terrifying child. He has been burned black and his mouth is blood red. Sometimes even when I'm awake I get a thought of him totally out of the blue. It never fails to make me go hot and cold with fear. Something my mother used to say meant that someone was walking across my grave. At about 4:30 this morning I woke up because it sounded like someone walked into my room. I was still groggy when I got a mental image of that child standing outside my window staring in at me. My kitten was sleeping right beside me and he woke up staring at the window. First of all, Frank is a dummy. He's the only clumsy cat I've ever known and has the sort of cat that meows out the window at birds. Frank stood up and arched his back and his tail puffed up and he growled at the goddamn window. Then he crept across me like he was stalking something and slid onto the windowsill. He stood there turned sideways all puffed up for a long time. Nothing else happened, but it creeped me the duck out. My mom worked at an old hotel in my town that was notoriously haunted. My brother and I would always run around and play while she was working. We went down in the basement one day and when the elevator opened on the basement floor we saw a janitor standing there with a cleaning cart. He was a tall black man in a blue custodial suit and had a huge smile. We said hello and went on our way and didn't think anything of it. Sometime later we mentioned to our mom that we met the janitor and she looked extremely concerned and said that they didn't and had never had a janitor. I saw a UFO. This was around 2008. I was staying on a cottage farm in England. I can't remember the exact location. For a night with one of my closest friends at the time. I suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and had difficulty breathing. I tried to scream and failed, so knocked over a lamp to get the attention of my friend's mum. My parents decided to take me to hospital, but they needed to get changed first, and so they left me in the car under a blanket. While I was in the car I saw a massive ball of red light come up from the horizon and then go down again promptly, like a semicircle movement. When I got to the hospital my memories are a little blurry, but I think that they pretty much said that there was nothing wrong with me. It didn't feel like nothing. I could hardly speak. I thought that this was sleep paralysis or some similar hypnagogic state in which movement is possible because it all seemed to fit. Until I asked my dad if he'd had any UFO experiences and he said that when we were staying on that farm, he saw a big ball of red light like the sun. He said that he saw it from the window of the cottage. Seeing as he had to stay there to look after my younger brother, he saw something large and red on the horizon and specifically remembers thinking it was weird. Later that night, or the night after, I had a weird nightmare of a spindly brown hand all sinewy, almost like it was made out of silly string or something reaching out from underneath my friend's bed. It wasn't really a nightmare. I was half awake and was aware of my surroundings. But I had little floaters of light in my field of vision. Sorta like what you see if you screw your eyes shut really tight. I have previously attempted to reconstruct what I saw using Photoshop, but I couldn't get the sinews or the floaters to look right. I always discounted this experience as sleep paralysis before my dad told me what he'd seen. Now I'm not so sure. When I was about 5 I saw my deceased grandmother sitting at the foot of my bed. She said to me, "Don't worry, everything will be okay." What really gets me is how I knew it was my grandmother, since she passed away when I was 2 and only a few years ago did I actually find out what she looked like. My grandmother willed me her rocking chair, the one she used to rock me in as an infant. After her funeral, I kept the rocker in my room alongside the bed. Then, after going to bed at night, I started imagining that she was actually sitting in that rocking chair, talking to me as if she was still alive. We had full conversations, back and forth, until one night, weeks later, it suddenly ended. As I've described here, in our script some time ago. It seemed so real, not just a dream. I was sad when her visitations ended and our discussions about many interesting things. Let me tell you all about the time I became psychic. So a little bit of backstory first. My father divorced my mother when I was 4 and has seen several other women since, all but one very nice people. He was seeing the woman who would eventually become my stepmother, who I adore, but she lived a town over. When my half-brothers were staying with their mother, he would leave me alone at the house while he visited her. Me, being a 17-year-old high school senior with urges, didn't care that he left, and I would just chill and play games or whatever. The other bit of backstory is that back in 2005, my dad nearly lost his leg to a flesh-eating disease. He managed to recover without amputation, but it still hurts and his ankle is permanently fused. Anyway, a few years ago, on a Saturday night around 9, this was the situation. I was chilling out in my living room playing Xbox, and I was home alone. Dad had been gone for a few hours, and my brothers wouldn't be back until the next day, so I was pretty relaxed. However, at exactly 9:10 p.m, I knew something was wrong. Deeply wrong. I had no idea what it was, and I had no idea where it came from, but I knew something was terribly wrong. Usually these feelings go away after a few seconds, like negative thoughts, but this wasn't going away. It was bad enough that I had to stop playing the game and go to my room, inspecting things to see if something had fallen, something was broken, etc. I didn't know what was wrong, so I figured that would be the reason. But nothing was there. Check the kitchen and living room. Nothing. Check all my electronics. Nothing. But I'm not taking no for an answer. I know for a fact that something is wrong. So I start going to every room in the house, the backyard, everything. I'm starting to grow really paranoid at this point, and the feeling still hasn't gone away. That's when I get a call from my soon-to-be stepmother. Since it had snowed recently, the roads were icy, and Dad had slipped and broken the ankle on his bad leg. When I asked when it happened, she told me about 10 minutes after 9. Exactly 9:10 p.m. I've never believed in psychic bonds, but something freaky happened that night that I've still never been able to explain. Maybe I have a deeper bond than I know. For my dad's birthday a few years ago, we went golfing with some of his friends. There were 8 of us total, so we split into 2 groups of 4. My dad and I were in the lead group and were walking from the 6th green to the 7th tee, while the group behind was approaching the 6th green. Behind the 6th green is a lightly wooded area that separates the golf course from a cemetery. As you approach the 6th green, you can easily see into the cemetery. As our group worked our way through the 6th hole, we saw no one in the cemetery. As we got up to the 7th tee box and the trailing group got to the 6th green, we all heard a female voice say "Great day for golf." How we all turned startled and saw a woman in the trees that was not there when we finished up 6. Then almost as instantly as she appeared, she disappeared. No one remembers seeing her walk away. Where we were on the 7th hole was elevated, so we had an even better view into the cemetery and didn't see her walk away. She was just gone. All 8 people there saw the same thing. It was a really unnerving experience that none of us have a good answer for. Please subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.